When people think about Sense and Sensibility, they usually remember the love stories first. Eleanor and Edward, Marianne and Willoughby, Colonel Brandon patiently waiting in the background. But if romance were all Jane Austen wanted to write about, the novel probably would not still be discussed more than 2 centuries later. The relationships provide the emotional heartbeat of the story, but beneath them Austen is asking a much larger question. What happens when life refuses to follow the future we imagined? At the beginning of the novel, both Eleanor and Marianne believe they understand themselves. Eleanor trusts judgment, while Marianne trusts emotion. Each sister sees her own way of experiencing the world as natural, and each struggles to understand the other. Marianne mistakes Eleanor's restraint for a lack of feeling, while Eleanor worries that Marianne allows emotion to outrun judgment. Both sisters are partly right, and both are partly wrong. That is what makes the title Sense and Sensibility so important. Readers sometimes approach the novel as though Austen is asking us to choose between reason and emotion, between Eleanor and Marianne. By the end of the story, however, it becomes clear that choosing one side entirely misses the point. Eleanor's good judgment does not spare her from heartbreak, just as Marianne's emotional honesty does not protect her from disappointment. One controls her response to pain, while the other openly experiences it, but neither escapes suffering. Eleanor falls deeply in love with Edward and quietly imagines a future with him. When Lucy Steele reveals the secret engagement, Eleanor is devastated. Her sense helps her maintain composure, but it cannot erase her grief. Marianne experiences the opposite problem. Because her feelings for Willoughby are genuine, she assumes the relationship itself must be secure. She knows how deeply she loves him and mistakes that certainty for evidence that he must feel the same way. By the conclusion of the novel, each sister has learned from the other. Eleanor allows herself to express joy more openly, while Marianne learns to pause before allowing emotion to become certainty. Neither woman abandons her personality. Instead, they become more balanced versions of themselves. Austen suggests that reason without emotion can become cold and isolating, while emotion without judgment can transform assumptions into unquestioned truths. Rather than asking readers to silence either the heart or the mind, Austen encourages both to work together. Money forms another essential layer of the novel. Before romance enters the story, inheritance reshapes the lives of the Dashwood women. The loss of Norland forces them into financial uncertainty and influences nearly every important relationship that follows. John Dashwood slowly convinces himself that helping his stepmother and sisters is unnecessary. Willoughby abandons Marianne in favor of financial security. Edward's family attempts to use inheritance as leverage over his future, while Lucy Steele carefully watches the shifting fortunes of the Ferrars family before deciding where her own future lies. Modern readers sometimes wonder why Austen spends so much time discussing income, property, and inheritance. In her world, however, these subjects were not merely social curiosities. They determined security, independence, and opportunity. For many women, marriage shaped nearly every aspect of life, from financial stability to social position. Austen does not celebrate marrying for wealth, but she recognizes the pressures that make those choices understandable. Her characters exist within a system that constantly forces love and economics into conflict. This complexity explains why Austen rarely divides people into simple categories of heroes and villains. John Dashwood is undeniably selfish, but readers watch him gradually justify his behavior until he believes he is acting reasonably. Fanny Dashwood manipulates her husband without dramatic speeches or obvious cruelty. Lucy Steele is calculating, yet her actions also reflect the limited opportunities available to women seeking security. Even Willoughby, whose decisions devastate Marianne, genuinely loved her. Austen allows readers to understand each character's motivations without asking them to excuse the consequences of those choices. Throughout the novel, Austen is fascinated by the stories people tell themselves. John convinces himself that the Dashwood women need very little financial help. Marianne convinces herself that Willoughby's affection guarantees a future together. Eleanor believes controlling her emotions means she can carry every burden alone. Willoughby persuades himself that financial necessity excuses abandoning the woman he loves. Again and again, characters reshape reality until it supports the decision they already want to make. This idea connects directly to one of the novel's central themes, first impressions. Marianne immediately admires Willoughby because he appears passionate, expressive, and interested in the same books, music, and poetry she loves. Those similarities feel like proof of character. Colonel Brandon creates the opposite impression. He is older, quieter, and far more reserved. So Marianne assumes there is little worth discovering beneath the surface. Both judgments turn out to be incomplete. Willoughby's charm is genuine, and his feelings may even be sincere, but charm does not guarantee integrity. Colonel Brandon's reserve is equally genuine, yet quiet behavior should never be mistaken for emotional emptiness. Marianne must experience disappointment before she learns to distinguish excitement from character. Although Eleanor is more observant than her sister, she is not immune to incomplete information. She correctly believes Edward cares for her, but she has no knowledge of his long-standing engagement to Lucy Steele. Austen repeatedly reminds readers that every decision is made with limited knowledge. Often, people do not even realize what information they are missing. That is one reason Sense and Sensibility rewards careful rereading. Small conversations, seemingly minor characters, and casual remarks often carry significance that only becomes clear later. Lucy Steele appears almost insignificant when she first enters the novel, yet one private conversation transforms the entire story. On a second reading, those early scenes feel completely different because readers now recognize the clues that were present all along. This approach also provides an excellent way to analyze the novel in class or in writing. Rather than simply asking what happened, it is often more useful to ask why Austen allows events to unfold the way they do. John Dashwood gradually reduces the financial support he intends to give because Austen wants readers to observe how selfishness disguises itself as practicality. Marianne's rejection by Willoughby is quiet because emotional distance often hurts more than dramatic confrontation. Eleanor keeps Lucy's secret because responsibility sometimes requires carrying burdens alone. Colonel Brandon initially seems unimpressive because both Marianne and the reader are encouraged to mistake excitement for value. Another question readers often ask is whether Sense and Sensibility is a romance or a critique of romance. In many ways, it is both. Austen never dismisses love. Eleanor and Edward genuinely care for one another. Marianne truly loves Willoughby, and Colonel Brandon's devotion is sincere from the beginning. What Austen questions is the belief that emotion alone provides enough information to build a future. Marianne mistakes shared interests for complete understanding. She assumes that because she and Willoughby love the same books, music, and poetry, they must also share the same values. Austen gently reminds readers that enjoying the same art reveals very little about how someone will behave when faced with difficult choices. Character is not measured by taste. It is revealed through decisions. This principle applies throughout the novel. John Dashwood makes a promise, and readers discover who he is when honoring that promise becomes expensive. Willoughby declares affection, and readers discover his priorities when love conflicts with financial security. Edward regrets his engagement, and readers see his character when escaping it would require breaking his word. Colonel Brandon continues showing kindness despite receiving very little encouragement in return. Austen repeatedly demonstrates that character becomes visible when doing the right thing is also the difficult thing. Growth, rather than romance alone, ultimately becomes the novel's greatest achievement. Eleanor and Marianne do not become wiser because someone explains life's lessons to them. They become wiser because experience forces them to question beliefs they once considered unquestionable. Marianne learns that emotional honesty without judgment can become destructive, while Eleanor discovers that perfect self-control can become emotional isolation. Importantly, neither sister abandons the qualities that make her unique. Marianne's emotional depth remains one of her greatest strengths because it allows her to experience extraordinary joy and beauty. Eleanor's calm judgment continues making her dependable and compassionate. Their weaknesses are connected to those same strengths, and their growth comes from learning balance rather than replacing one personality with another. By the final chapters, both sisters find happiness, but neither receives the future she originally imagined. Eleanor never expected years of secrecy and family conflict before marrying Edward. Marianne certainly never imagined Colonel Brandon becoming the man she would love. Life changes their expectations, just as it changes ours. That may be one of the novel's most timeless observations. People naturally build futures based on the information available today. We expect relationships to continue, promises to be kept, and plans to unfold as we imagine them. Then circumstances change. New information appears. Someone makes an unexpected decision. A promise is broken, and the future we believed was certain disappears. Austen reminds readers that we cannot always control those events, but we can control what we learn from them. Marianne's disappointment does not end her ability to love. Eleanor's heartbreak does not permanently close her heart. Loss changes them, but it does not destroy them. Instead, disappointment reveals truths their earlier assumptions could never have shown. That is why Sense and Sensibility continues to feel remarkably relevant. The inheritance laws, customs, and social expectations belong to another century, but the emotional questions remain timeless. How well do we really know the people we love? How much should emotion influence our decisions? When does caution protect us? And when does it isolate us? Can someone genuinely love another person while still making selfish choices? What happens when the future we believed in suddenly disappears? Jane Austen never offers simple answers to those questions. Instead, she gives us Eleanor and Marianne, then allows life to test both of them. Through their successes and failures, readers discover that maturity does not require choosing between the heart and the mind. It requires learning when each deserves to lead. Feel deeply, but pay attention. Love generously, but watch people's choices. Use good judgment, but never mistake silence for strength. Sense and sensibility are not opposing forces. At their best, they balance and strengthen one another. That, more than anything else, may be what Jane Austen intended all along. Thank you for listening to Small Books. If this audio study companion helped you better understand Sense and Sensibility, share it with another student or reader working through the novel.